All right. Shalom, everybody. Today is Wednesday, March 10th, 2021. And we are here at United Orthodox Synagogues for our weekly lunch and learn. And today we are a little bit early because of some scheduling things. Today is also the 26th of Adar, 5781. We should start giving the Hebrew date also. And so we are going to be discussing, we are in our Mitzvah Shiur, and we took a break from Parshat HaShavua, if you remember, to talk about Pesach mitzvot. Not things related to the Seder. We're going to have time to talk about that as well in another class. But this is the mitzvot in the Torah that deal with Pesach. And today we're going to deal with a halacha regarding Korban Pesach, the paschal sacrifice that had to be brought every year. And a really, really interesting and out of the ordinary halacha. So let's jump right to it. This is mitzvah number 7, by the way. In the Sefer HaChinuch's counting of mitzvot, this is mitzvah number 7. This is all the way in the 12th parak of Shemot. As we've discussed, there are not a lot of mitzvot in Sefer Bereshit, and the early mitzvot in Sefer Shemot, many of them have to do with Pesach, because that's, of course, what was going on. So we are in mitzvah number 7, and this is the prohibition of eating or cooking the Korban Pesach in any way other than roasting. The only way that one was permitted to roast the Korban Pesach was, as they say, al ha'esh, but not a barbecue, but not a barbecue like we have on a grill. Had to be on a spit, right?
On a what?
On a spit, a rotisserie.
Oh.
I don't know how do you say that in Hebrew, Nitza? Chana, how do you say that in Hebrew? On a spit. On a makel. Anyway, and the Gemara in Masechet Pesachim talks about which types of wood you're allowed to use, because some wood had too much moisture in it. Anyway, no liquid, on the open fire, mangal al ha'esh for Korban Pesach. Okay. Shipud, that's the word. Thank you. Toda rabah, Nitza. Yes, shipud. Okay. So now, if we ever, please God, we'll all have a chance to go back to Israel soon. We can go to our favorite restaurant, and we would say, I would like my steak cooked like the Korban Pesach. And we'll see if the waiter is an Am Haaretz or not. We'll see if the waiter knows anything. And if he knows what you mean, then we're in good shape. If he says, what does that mean? Then I don't know. Okay, so here's the pasuk, Perek Yudbet, pasuk Tet. Al tochlu mimenu na uvashel mivushal b'mayim. Do not eat it raw, nor boiled at all with water. Ki im tzli esh, rosho al kira'av va'al kirbo. But roast with fire with its head, its legs, and its inner parts. Meaning the whole animal had to be together. It wasn't butchered. It was just slaughtered. And then the shipud was put through the animal, and it was roasted. Now, there's specific halachot about the innards. Some of the innards were taken out and tied up on top of the animal, but the whole animal had to be roasted. Okay, Nitza's giving us an illustration. Okay, so that's halacha. We're not allowed to eat it raw or boiled in water. It has to be roasted on a fire. So let's learn.
Baking? Baking in the oven?
Nope.
No baking?
Nope. Ala esh, mamash, with a shipud. That's it. That's the only way the Korban Pesach could be brought. Okay? Although the dry baking is going to play a role. We'll get to it at the end. All right? So that's a good point, Nitza. We'll get to it a little bit later. So here's the initial. Oh, I see a chat is open. We cannot hear you. Chana, can you not hear me?
Now we can, but in the beginning it was a part that you talked and we couldn't hear you.
Okay, Baruch Hashem, it's all fixed. Okay, thank you. So here's the Sefer HaChinuch, Shelo le'echol ha'pesach na'u mivashel, that one cannot eat the Pesach sacrifice uncooked or boiled. Shelo le'echol mibasar pesach na'u vashel ki im tzli esh, it can only be roasted on a fire. Shene'emar, Al tachlu mimenu na uvashel mivushal b'mayim ki im tzliyesh. The pasuk that we just read. You shall not eat it raw or boiled with water, but only roasted with fire. Ha'inyan hazeh shelo yochal oto kodem gemar bishulo afilu bitzli. So there are two things here. Even if you put it on the fire, it still has to reach a certain level of being cooked. The Sefer HaChinuch here says it has to be gemar bishulo, fully cooked. Right. So again, if you go to the restaurant, you tell the waiter you want your steak like the Korban Pesach. If he asks you if you want it medium rare or rare, it's another proof he doesn't know, because the halacha is it has to be completely cooked. Now, by the way, we're not going to get into it so much, but within halacha, there is a discussion of what cooked means. So I'll give you an example. We're not allowed to cook on Shabbat. So if one cooks on Shabbat, at what point does one violate the prohibition of cooking on Shabbat? Does one violate the prohibition of cooking on Shabbat as soon as the heat touches the meat? Or does the meat have to reach a certain level of being cooked? There is a phrase in halacha called ma'achal ben drusai. Anyone hear that before? Ma'achal ben drusai. Ben drusai. You've heard this, Nitza?
I don't know what is Ben Dusa.
Ben Drusai was a bandit. It was the name of a person. He was a bandit, as my Zaidi would say when I was making too much noise. You're a bandit. He was a bandit, right? He was, and he was always on the run. So he never had time to cook his food fully. So partially cooked food in the Talmud is called ma'achal ben Drusai. Food like ben Drusai, which is a machloket between Rashi and Tosfot, whether it's a half cooked or 2/3 cooked. So we do have discussions in halacha about what cooked means. But here it seems to be saying you cannot, even if you apply an open fire to the Korban Pesach, it's still considered raw until it's fully cooked. Right? There are only two definitions for the Korban Pesach, it sounds like. Raw or fully cooked. Anything between raw and fully cooked, according to our understanding right now, is raw. Let's finish this one paragraph. So even if you do put it on the open fire, it has to be fully cooked. Perush na. That is what raw means, meaning not fully cooked. Shabasar shetchil bo maaseh haor v'nitzlem me'at. So now it's getting a little murky, because it says, what is the definition of raw? That the fire has begun to have an effect on it, and it's cooked it a lot. It's cooked it a little bit, me'at, but it's not yet fit for a human to eat. Adayin nikra na. So now we seem to have two contradictory phrases, right? We have one phrase which says gemar bishulo, until it's completely cooked. But then we have another statement that says, Ra'ui la'achilat adam. Now we all know that Ra'ui la'achilat adam does not necessarily mean fully cooked. Right? We eat things that are not fully cooked all the time, that are we consider them Ra'ui la'achilat adam. So I'm just pointing this out. This is a discussion in the commentaries on the Sefer HaChinuch as to what cooked means. So it can't be raw. After that, not clear. Aval kishu chay legamre shelo hitchil bo haor klal ein bechlal lav dena lilakot alav mishum al tochlu mimenu na. This is a surprise. Here's the scenario. We'll take a vote. Let's say you take your Korban Pesach and you put it on the spit and you light the fire under it and you cook it for 2 minutes and then you eat it. Have you violated this prohibition of eating the Korban Pesach raw? Yes or no? Raise your hand if you say yes.
No. You violated it.
I think the answer is yes. You have, in fact, violated it because it's only cooked for a little while. But let's say you don't cook it at all.
What?
You don't cook it at all, and you eat the Korban Pesach. raw, like tartar, steak, Korban Pesach tartar, right? Eat it totally raw, right? So here, counterintuitively, the Sefer HaChinuch says, you're not allowed to do that, but that does not bring you lashes, right? It's not considered as serious because the definition of raw is a little cooked. But if you eat it totally raw, then it's, again, you're not allowed to do that, but you don't get lashes, he says. He says, Ein bichlal lav dina lilakot alav mishum al tochlu mimenuna. That's just a technical point. Go ahead, Shula.
So why is it the gmar bishulo? It's not a little bit.
Yeah, because you have to start it. You have to start the bishul to get into the olam, into the realm of na. But if you never start it, halachically, it's not called na. It's called something else.
What is it called?
I don't know what it's called. If you don't start cooking it at all, I'm not sure. We would call that na in modern Hebrew. How do you say raw in modern Hebrew?
You write it nun ayin because it moves. That's
Nun
what.
ayin. Yeah.
And here
Well, in
they
Hebrew,
put it nun aleph.
in the
That's
Torah,
why I
it's nun
don't
aleph.
understand.
In the Torah, it's nun aleph. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on. Aval asur midoraita shekol she'eno tzli eish asra haTorah derech klal. So you're still not allowed to eat it raw, but it doesn't bring the level of punishment. Okay. So that's the halacha. Now the question is why, right? Why? Let's see if we can figure this out. Why do you think that the halacha is that you can only eat the Korban Pesach barbecued with a spit over an open fire, with the flames coming up and the heat, cooking it that way? Why do you think that is the halacha? Right? There are other ways to cook. You could put it. You could bake it, and you could broil it. You could bake it. Any suggestions?
This has to do with the flame, with the odor, with the smell of the cooking smell.
Ooh, excellent. Okay. Why is the smell important?
That means that it's been accepted. I mean, you feel it. I don't know.
Okay, so let me share with you, Shul, this is so interesting. Let me share with you the Chizkuni, one of the commentaries on the Chumash. He says the following, exactly what you said. It's right over here. I'm gonna hold on one second. Just trying to manipulate my screen a little bit. Everyone see where Chizkuni? I'm going to highlight it. Everyone see that? Shula, you see it? Chizkuni in orange. Tzli eish, sheyehei reicho holech v'nodef b'chotaman shel Mitzrayim. The reason it had to be, at least in Pesach Mitzrayim, at least in Egypt, the reason it had to be roasted on the open fire is so that the smell, the odor, right? We all know, like when we were having our freeze, we all knew which people had fireplaces, and we all know on a nice summer day when people are barbecuing, because you smell that. You smell that. So says the Chizkuni, the reason why it had to be al ha'esh like that is so sheyehei reicho holech v'nodef b'chotman shel Mitzrayim v'yed'u she'atem ochlim et yir atem. So they would know that we are eating their God. It's like in your face. Had we just said, okay, take the Korban Pesach, cut it up into cubes, cut some vegetables, put it into a pot in your fire in your house, and have a Korban Pesach stew, that may have been delicious, like a Korban Pesach cholent, but no one would have smelled it, and it wouldn't have been sort of like it's very harsh. It's a way to almost rub the noses of the Egyptians in their defeat, and to show that you think that, meaning, because Paro and was saying that I'm a god and they had their own gods, to say that you think your gods are powerful, they're false. They are no match for our God, and to show you we're going to eat your God, and you're going to smell it. And so it's a very, very powerful. It's maybe a little borderline, I don't know, harsh. But nonetheless, that's what the Chizkuni says, like you said. And then the Torah, by the way, the next pasuk says, Al matzot umirorim yochluhu. The Korban Pesach had to be eaten with maror. Why? Why maror? And so here the Chizkuni follows the same line of reasoning. Al mirorim, im mirorim, kol zeh derech bizayon, sheyochluhu im davar ra. Not only are we eating the God of the Mitzrim, we're eating it with something which makes the whole thing taste terrible. Al davar ra umar v'lo im davar chashuv umatok. Right? If you really want to honor this animal, eat it with something delicious. But we're eating it with maror, which makes it taste terrible. It's not a good condiment for a Korban Pesach. And so it's all derech bizayon. And the Chizkuni, by the way, says this about some of the other mitzvot related to Korban Pesach. It's all about showing the Egyptians who's boss. Excellent. Shula, Baruch, Shekivant.
I just remembered something about the mention about the order of the, but I didn't know why.
I'm thinking of releasing a new perfume right before Pesach called de Korban. And it'll smell just like the Korban Pesach, and everyone coming to Shul will smell like, I don't know what it's supposed to smell like. Okay, Nitza, yes.
I have a question. Erev Pesach comes on Shabbat this time.
Yes.
So you have to light the barbecue when on Shabbat?
Oh, so what did they do when it fell out in the time of the Beit HaMikdash? No, I think. What did they do? That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. In the Beit HaMikdash, Karbanot were brought on Shabbat all the time. I'm sorry. The Korban was shechted. The Korban was cooked right after Shabbat. Right after Tzeit HaKochavim, the Korban was cooked and then eaten. The Gemara talks about it. The Korban was cooked and eaten right after Shabbat. It was not cooked on Shabbat.
So you do have Dalah, and then you start cooking. Takes
Correct.
time. And
Right.
then you eat it at 10 p.m. or who knows when.
Right. It was a late night in the time of the Beit HaMikdash. Correct.
A late story.
Yes. Yes. All right. So, any other suggestions as to why only Sli'esh and not any other way of cooking besides what Shula said with the Chizkuni? Any other suggestions?
It's also maybe it's visible, you see it. If it's in a pot cooked, you don't see it. If it's
Good,
on
okay.
shiput,
Along the same lines, you don't do that inside your house. You do it maybe in your backyard or your front yard. Correct? Good. Okay, let's see.
Maybe
Yeah.
maybe because they cooked they did the tzli for the smell and everything, what the things that you just told us. Maybe they tried I don't know, to do something different than the Egyptians. I don't know if the Egyptians, the way they ate their animals, or maybe it's another way to cook it, or to show the Mitzrim we are doing the opposite of what you are doing. I don't know.
That is very interesting. That is really an interesting suggestion.
Something
And-
like a contra, like
Yeah.
we will show you something different. You did it, this, we'll do this. I don't know, I'm just guessing.
So let me second. I think it was in the Ralbag, perhaps, where he said something like this. It was to sort of separate from the ways of the Egyptians. Yeah. Well, he says that about the halacha that I'm going to talk about when I do the call with the OU is another mitzvah relating to Korban Pesach, where you're not allowed to leave any of it over until the morning. You have to eat the whole animal has to be eaten that night. So the Ralbag says as follows. Right? They had to. All these things were done in order to show a distinction or to in some way show the difference between them and Emunat Mitzrayim. Ki bazet yashru Yisrael yoter lasur mehamunahi. Meaning they have to maybe not have to be all gone, as to indicate that this is the God of Mitzrayim and it's all gone. We're totally separated from it. So I think you could apply the same idea to what to what you're saying, that it was a way to, maybe there was a difference between the way the Egyptians ate, or they ate a certain way, and Bnei Yisrael were told to do it another way. Yeah.
No, maybe they cooked it. We don't know. Maybe they didn't
Right.
do tzli alesh.
Correct. Right. We don't know. It could be. It could be. Excellent.
And
Let's
and
go.
also, Rabbi,
Yes. Yes.
and also I was taught by somebody the past week that the reason for Korban Pesach had to be finished that night was encouragement, a hint for the families. If you are 4 people, you're 6 people, but you can't eat a whole Korban Pesach, so you must share with your neighbor. So hi, come on in. Why don't we all eat well? They
Right.
used to have families eating together, which brought community, nationality. It's all connected.
Right.
That's why we had to finish it that night. So, because Hashem knew you can't. Let's say a young couple just got married. So,
Right. Okay.
all
Great.
right.
Okay. Excellent answer. So let's look at the Sefer HaChinuch. As we know, the Sefer HaChinuch first gives the describes the mitzvah, then he gives the hashkafa, the idea behind the mitzvah. Misharshe mitzvah zo. The point of this mitzvah, he says as follows. Masha katuv b'shchitato lizkor neis Yetziat Mitzrayim. So first of all, everything about Korban Pesach is to remember the Yetziat Mitzrayim. That's the first reason. He says Pesach l'dorot, generations later. The reason we do it is to remember Yetziat Mitzrayim. V'zeu shnitztavinu la'ochlot tzli davka. Then he adds something, and the reason why we have to eat it specifically tzli. This is the way that royal people and princes, important people, maybe wealthy people, this is the way they eat. Shumachal tov umitam. It's the tastiest way to eat. So it could be related to what Chana was saying, that maybe the Egyptians ate one way, and this was considered to be the fanciest way to eat. And of course, we know on Pesach, we have a whole bunch of things that we do to indicate that we are b'nei chorin, that we're free, and that we're important, right? We have heseba. We're supposed to lean when we drink the wine and eat the matzah. These are all indications of a level of importance of even royalty. And says the Sefer HaChinuch that is what was behind this as well. For some reason, maybe the meat shrinks on the fire, and so therefore the regular people don't eat that way because they don't want to diminish their amount of food. But he says the regular people don't eat that way. They eat it mivushal. They eat it cooked in a pot. Again, maybe it's more filling, or maybe because you mix it with other things. How beautiful that we were taken out of Mitzrayim in order to be a kingdom of Kohanim and a holy nation. Right? We have a level of importance. We have a mission in this world. And so when we're leaving Mitzrayim, and when we're remembering leaving Mitzrayim, we want to make sure that we recall that we have a mission, that we have things to accomplish. We have an important job. And so we remember that that's the way important people eat. We are supposed to act in a way of freedom and even a level of authority, right? That we have an important mission to carry out in this world. So that is, so far, 2 answers. One is remembering Yetziat Mitzrayim in general. Let's back up. We have the answer that Shula gave, which was the same answer of the Chizkuni, that it's so the Egyptians would smell it and understand that they've lost. Then we have 2 answers so far from the Sefer HaChinuch. One is generally to remember Yetziat Mitzrayim. But then he says specifically when it comes to tzli, it's because that's the way important people or royalty eat. And we are that because we are here to carry out certain we are princes and God is the king, and we are here to carry out certain activities and achieve certain things in the world. And so we have to remember that on the holiday we remember the formation of our nation. We have to remember that. And so we eat like important people eat, at least for Korban Pesach. And then he says milvad shachilat, and besides that, shachilat tatzli yore al achipazon sheyatzu miMitzrayim v'lo yachlu lishhot ad shitpashel b'kdeira. Sli is the quickest way of cooking, direct contact with the fire. And so since we have direct contact with the fire, it's quick, and therefore we are reminded.
Morning, this is Avery with Care for Sex Orthotics, calling for Ms. Shulamit Yosher. Ms. Yosher,
we are reminded that we left Mitzrayim quickly, and by cooking it quickly, we are reminded that we left Mitzrayim quickly. So the Sefer HaChinuch has three reasons. One, a general reminder of Yetziat Mitzrayim. Two, we remember that we left as princes, as important people, and we have to remember that on Seder night, and this is the way important people cook their food. And three, it reminds us of the chipazon, that God took us out of Mitzrayim very, very quickly. And those are some of the answers of why we eat with sli. So just one more thing, quick. Do we have any application of this halakha today? Right? We do not have Korban Pesach. There's no Beit HaMikdash. Hopefully soon, b'mheira b'yameinu, we'll have the Beit HaMikdash. We'll be able to bring Korbanot, but we do not have that. So is there any remnant, srid upleta? Is there any remnant of this mitzvah left?
Shulchan Shabbat is not like the Mizbeach? The Shulchan where we
every Shulchan, that's correct. Every Shulchan domet lemizbeach, the Gemara says. But let's talk about specifically Korban Pesach. You're right, Shula. But you're right, Chana. But is there any remnant of the prohibition of eating, of the requirement to only have tzli on Pesach? Is there any remnant of that bisman hazeh?
Bisman hazeh? Challah? No. It's not the challah, right?
No, I'm talking about specifically Pesach. We don't have challah on Pesach.
Right.
Is there any remnant of this regarding Pesach?
We have the shank bone on the Seder plate.
Okay, that's true. We have the shank bone on the Seder plate. Excellent, and that we are supposed to.
Beitza.
No, the beitza is the Korban Chagiga.
Chagiga, nachon.
But we have the Zro'ah, which is the Zecher LeKorban Pesach. However, there's something else. Shula, you're muted if you're trying to say something. You're muted.
We're not allowed, I think the meat that we're eating on the Seder has to be roasted. Some people don't eat mevushal.
No, okay, almost. The opposite. Here's the Gemara. Good. The Gemara Masechet Pesachim says, Makom shenahagu, we're down here, this source right here. Makom shenahagu lechol tzli belel psachim ochlin. Makom shenahagu shelo lechol ein ochlin. There are some places where the minhag is dafka not to eat tzli on Pesach, not to eat roasted food on Pesach. Why? Says Rashi, the mechze ke'ochel Pesach bachutz. Because if we eat tzli on Pesach, it may look like we are eating a Korban Pesach b'chutz. Chutz lema, chutz liYerushalayim. The Korban Pesach had to be eaten in Yerushalayim. So if I eat tzli in Houston, it looks like I'm eating tzli outside of the area where I'm allowed to eat it. And the Shulchan Aruch says, Makom shenahagu lechol tzli belel psachim ochlim. Makom shenahagu shelo lechol ein ochlim. Gezerah shema yomru basar pesachu. Lest people get confused and think this is the Korban Pesach. And even if you live in a place where people do eat sli on Pesach, you certainly cannot have a full lamb cooked on a shipud on Pesach. Because that looks like we're eating sanctified food out of the precincts of where it's allowed to be eaten. And the Shulchan Aruch goes on to say, Afilu basar egel ve'of kol davar sheta'un shchita asur lechol. Not only the animals that could have been brought for a Korban Pesach, but any animal that requires shchita, some people have the custom not to eat it roasted at all on Pesach. Now, does this apply to what we call roasting, which is putting it in a pot with some water in the oven? Probably not. It probably doesn't apply. The Shevet HaLevi in a tshuva was asked this question: Le'inyan achilat basar behemat sli belel psachim l'shulchan aruch v'tziyein ki hatzli she'osimhu lo tzli mamash ela im mayim v'tzideid lekan ulekan. So someone asked Rav Vosner whether or not they could roast a pot roast, right? What we call a pot roast. A pot roast has other things in it. It's not just the dry meat in a pot. There's liquid, there's vegetables, right? What's that?
Spices.
Spices, right. So he says Rav Vosner as follows. He says, Hinei afal pi she'anachnu bnei Ashkenaz heim mimakom she'asur lechol tzli kemuvuar b'Torah uposkim. It says, even though we come from the lands of Ashkenaz where we do not eat tzli, as the Shulchan Aruch says and others say, nonetheless, Dekol sheyesh marak v'afilu nitztamek achar kach eino tzli min hadin. If you started out with some liquid, even if the liquid evaporates in the process of the cooking, that is not considered tzli. Kahai gamna pashuta l'kuli yama pasul. Because that would, how does he know that? Because you couldn't bring the Korban Pesach that way. Meaning anything that would have disqualified the Korban Pesach is not called tzli. And you could not do the Korban Pesach as a pot roast. Right? To l'kuli yama pasul v'chayvin alav b'Korban Pesach. Poskin dibru rak b'tzli kader or kedar, meaning only on the open fire. So that's what the Shevet HaLevi says. So a pot roast again would not apply. But many people have the custom not to have classic tzli, and some people are even strict on not to have even to put a piece of dry meat alone, even in the oven, because that's too close to the original tzli. And everyone should follow their family minhag of whether or not they had this custom. And so that's it. That's mitzvah number 7 in the Torah, that we are not allowed to cook the Korban Pesach na umuvushal. We cannot prepare it raw, which means a little cooked, and we also cannot cook it like we do a pot roast or anything like that. Has to be only on the fire. We saw 4 reasons, Shula's reason, along with the Chizkuni, and 3 reasons of the Minchas Chinuch. And we saw that there are 2 remnants of that halacha today. One is that we put a zroa on our ke'ara, on our Seder plate, zecher l'Korban Pesach. And we don't eat, many people have a custom not to eat tzli, so that we don't think that that's Korban Pesach, right? Since Korban Pesach could only have been brought as tzli, we do not eat tzli on Pesach. Okay, thank you for joining, everybody, and thank you for your wonderful insights and questions. As always, it's always a pleasure to learn together with you. I hope
it's a
everyone
pleasure
has a
to have you. It's a pleasure to have you in the lessons. Your lessons are amazing.
Thank you. If you want to
Thank you,
join,
Rabbi.
thank you. If you want to join the phone call, it's in 20 minutes.
So, Rega, how you get to this phone call again? Slicha?
If you look at I sent the phone number in the email and the WhatsApp. It's a regular phone call, not a.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Everyone. Take care. Good to see you.
Yom Tov.
Shalom,
Yom Tov,
shalom.
everybody.
Yom Tov.
Bye-bye.
Bye.